The impact of Michael Jackson has to do with what he did with music and how his music changed the entertainment business and where he's situated. Probably most of that impact is done by the early 1990s. He stops having the ability to really change much or reorient the music business very much. So it really is the period from about the time he began with the Jackson 5 in the early 1970s up through about the early 1990s or so. Still, in the history of popular music, that's a long time to have an effect on what's happening in popular music. A minute is like a generation in popular music. Things happen so quickly. In order to survive longer than about 3 or 4 years, on the radar screen of popular music is an amazing feat. And there's so many groups who have come and gone within that 3 or 4 year span of popularity. Jackson is a wonderful example of the extension of the Motown tradition. Berry Gordy Jr. establishing Motown Records in the late 1950s in Detroit. And all the great artists that came out of that in the 1960s, Michael Jackson and his brothers, the Jackson 5, were originally signed to Motown Records, coming out of Gary, Indiana, but signed by Berry. And one of the first acts to really be launched out of their Los Angeles offices when Motown left Detroit to go to Los Angeles. And as a child star, we have to understand that Michael Jackson really was kind of a bubblegum artist. I mean, he was the Jackson 5 and the Osmonds were the two young sort of singing groups that really sort of dominated all of the teen magazines. They started to think that was too limiting an image for them, and that Berry Gordy continued to try to push them as a bubblegum act, and they wanted to be more serious as more of the funk and disco groups were coming up in the early 1970s. They wanted to be more like, I don't know, Kool and the Gang or Earth, Wind and Fire than like Bobby Sherman or the Monkees or something. And so they left Motown and started their own career. And Michael started his own solo career, teaming up in 1979, I think it was, with Quincy Jones to produce the Off the Wall album, which, if you're going to have one disco album, that's the one disco album you need to have, because it's a great album from beginning to end. And nothing was more made for Michael Jackson than disco. Here's a music that depends upon a groove and a beat and features lots of dancing. And Michael Jackson, not only a talented singer, but also a wonderful dancer. So he had great success with Off the Wall in the years even before MTV, but when MTV came along and he could actually do videos where he was singing and dancing and they could be played over and over and over again, well, nothing could have been more perfect for him, and he made absolutely the most of it during the 1980s. A commanding presence in the history of rock music, as big to the 80s as Elvis was to the 50s or the Beatles were to the 60s. Just a commanding figure. You cannot take that. No amount of scandal can take that away from Michael Jackson and his legacy, and that's clearly the most important part of who he was and how we'll remember him. The other stories are fine and interesting and scandalous and whatever they are, but really it's his contribution to the history of music and popular culture that I think will be associated with Michael Jackson in years to come.